Here's our guest, Andrea Ravari. Hello, Andrea. How do you do?
Hi, Christoph. I'm okay, thanks, and you?
Yeah, good, good. Um, as you are originally from Italy, we wanted to gauge your perspective on some things. Um, Italy and Poland are quite similar countries, won't you agree? Both are quite conservative, with a strong influence of Catholic Church. Do you think that adherence to religion, as a defining feature of both nations, has something to do that both of countries began as divided between other powers of their respective regions?
So, I think religion plays a big role in our respective cultures and in any culture in general. I mean, whether it makes little difference where we are from, religion is a defining feature of our culture. And in specific about Italy, um, it is as defining as the fact that Italy got divided from the church politically only in 1929, so less than 100 years ago. So this can tell you how strict is the relationship between culture, Italian culture, and church.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really tight together. And I think that played a role, and but that was not the only factor. I think there's another factor, which was the belligerence of Europe. So how many wars we had in Europe, and I think all through the place we had a number of wars that is simply unbelievable, and that goes into a mechanism in which the biggest is the war. The bigger is the war, the bigger is the faith you need to have in order to live a life with peace. So I would say God entered very well in the houses of those that were hit by the war, and this is really well described by a book called Homo Deus by Dr. Harari,
Mm-hmm.
an historian from Israel, that describes how the life of human beings throughout history has always been a mixture of reality and fiction. So we cannot live our lives with only reality
Mm-hmm.
because that would be too hard. We need to have some motivators, some reason to live our lives and wake up in the morning, which is our fiction. We all have a different one. And religion is one of those things. And but we cannot live only of religion because we need to touch the ground and realize that life is now and God is up there.
Mm-hmm.
So the mixture of those make our each culture unique. And so for us nowadays probably it's hard to understand because we are living in the longest peaceful years of Europe, which is something that has never happened. Simply, probably within the Roman Empire, but not even them because they were expanding all the time. So this is why probably a very peaceful and low religion period is really unique right now, and we cannot understand the past very well.
Well, I agree, but over the last year, that period became slightly less peaceful. Uh, from what I can see, trust of people towards the institutions, like governments or international organizations, has eroded substantially. I can see that, for example, in Poland, when there is high level of doubt towards the institutions, and from that doubt flow quite considerable threats. For example, anti-vaccination movements and even COVID skepticism. How does Italy look like under this aspect?
So I think Italy right now and probably always, I cannot tell. I live now, so I don't have much to talk about probably. Italy right now is divided in a lot of small Italies, each Italy supporting a version of the facts of reality of history that is really unique, I would say. So for instance, you get those people that believe earth is flat, yeah, and you get people that would never get a vaccination, but you get people that would get the vaccination if they sympathize with the government, otherwise not. And you get at the same time people that still live within a framework of common sense, would reasonably believe what the government says, contributing constructively and with some healthy criticism. So what happens now that this is exactly the Italy that doesn't communicate to everyone else. So I believe this Italy here is composed by probably scientists or other people that or other professionals, let's say like this, that had the chance to study, is in a comfortable position in society and financially probably too, I cannot tell, that however has this privilege of having acquired some critical thinking that the others don't have. And exactly because these other people don't have this critical thinking, politicians, despite the fact that right now people on average finishes high school, they still found a way to get around this lack of critical thinking, and they feed the weakest and the most vulnerable people with the worst lies you can think of. And I mean, vaccination, not getting vaccinated is just one of the many. So as a scientist, I can tell you that it is easy not to speak to those people like many of us do. It is easy to speak to not to speak to the weakest, because we may believe that they are not at our same level, because we can believe that they will not understand. We can be insulted, you name it, okay? But I really think that it is easier for us to reach out and make the extra steps needed than for them to understand that they're missing a piece of the puzzle. And in this sense, we are the ones to blame, I think. I think we, as a community, science and scientists need to improve a lot in the communication, especially because we have as I said, we have the privilege of having a bit more critical thinking than my field of expertise is not doesn't cover all the fields. So I work with glass and I know a lot about glass, but if you ask me about anthropology, I know nothing. So I still need to rely on another scientist, another person more informed than me. And that's another thing that probably is given for granted.
Yeah, and that is, you touched on an important problem here, because we as a scientist have this duty to be more proactive towards the society, as the rest of society is to us, because we have the privilege more often than not, than they don't have. But from social point of view, this kind of schism of separate universes for scientists and the rest of the society is not good, because if people treat science and scientists as something separate from them, then they end up without having any kind of way to check facts, any kind of way to have a standard for what they consider a fact, and that gives birth to very dangerous trends like the ones mentioned before, but also to a more arcane one, like the very popular QAnon fantasy.
Oh yeah.
But again, that sounds like a topic for a separate talk. That maybe we can arrange that. But for now, let's go back to the differences and perspectives. Yes, and speaking of which, you yourself has been living in many countries, and you had access to many people with very various worldviews. And from this perspective, is Poland much more conservative than, let's say, EU baseline? From the reports you have read, is there any merit in France's and Germany's concerns about Polish adherence to the rule of law, or is it just a political play of the mighty with a country that is much weaker economically than them?
All right, so I'll break your question into parts because that's a really long question. So the first one is that about Poland being conservative. So based on what I read, and based on the people I met, and based on my friends, including you, I can tell that, in my opinion, Poland is a conservative country, and it might be more conservative than the average in Europe. And this being said, I don't think everyone in Poland is as conservative as we see in the news nowadays. So I think even in every country there's a variety of people, and not everyone only follows the trend we read on the media. But at the same time, I was really surprised to see implementations of policies like LGBT free zones, and having this as a something to be proud of. I really did not expect something like that. So I don't see how that can benefit Poland in any way beside electoral purposes. But you can tell me more, probably.
Yeah, so yeah, just as a clarification, these places have been declaring themselves, these not a lot of counties, just a handful, but still many, too many to my comfort, have been declaring themselves LGBT free due to considered threat from this so-called externally imported LGBT ideologies, considered as a threat to traditional set of Polish values. And there was no legislation like banning gay people from these areas, that has to be said. It was mostly a symbolic gesture, but at the same time, the fact that it was only symbolic shouldn't mean that we shouldn't worry about that, because I feel like this is demonstration of some very dangerous trends that we shouldn't be proud of, but we should work out to disentangle.
Exactly, and I mean, tolerance is the base of living between people come with different opinions, and
you would think that, wouldn't you? Right? Yeah.
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's not an easy job, but that's what I think is needed, and I think mostly that's where the strategy of France, Germany, and many other countries that don't put the face in there, but they still agree with them. That's where the strategy is. I mean, Europe is not due to start a war again, and we all hope that we don't. Okay, I really not looking forward to that personally. But at the same time, assuming we don't want to start a fight, we don't want to start a war, we need to have another mean of leverage between each other, and money seems to be the biggest leverage we can have right now. So with countries like Poland and Hungary, in which European funding is really important to keep going and keep the life standard to the standard they have now, and for Poland is much better than some years ago. Probably money is one of the few ways for Germany and the European Union as a whole, not just Germany, France, Italy, Spain, you name it, to actually keep everyone on the same track. And when I say keep everyone at the same track, this means that adhering to the European Union means adhering with a certain set of values you promise not to betray. And tolerance is one of those. Inclusivity is one of those.
Yeah.
And not respecting human rights is one of those. And human rights, we have the Universal Chart of Human Rights, and that's the very fundamental. But European Union expects a bit more. Expects democracy, expects a set of number of things that at least guarantee that you're free. And I think that is what they want to achieve. And if they need to do it with money, I don't know if that's the best way, but that seems to work because it raised a big issue. So I think it's really unfortunate that external countries, or let's say neighboring countries, need to fight between each other this way. And I really don't know if this is the best way of solving something like this, because you always have the problem of I'm an independent state. What do you want from me? But here I think we come to the paradox that the big is the same as the small, and with this I mean, as we don't want Germany to influence Poland, probably I don't want Poland or the government where I live right now to influence too much my personal freedom. So I want my freedom to end where the freedom of the community starts, and vice versa. And so that's what we should look forward, and that's what probably would solve many of the problems we have right now as a society. And I mean, as a direction, I think what the European Union wants to achieve is to have a common way forward, which simply goes into the direction of let's increase the number of rights we have. Let's increase the number of rights we give to minorities, the possibilities we give to each other, because this is raising the bar to a level that makes us better in a long run. Instead, repressing each other, taking freedom away from minorities, it is intrinsically going backwards, even for the majority of the people. Because I'll give you a silly example. Suppose we all live in the majority of the people. We don't like gay people, like many don't. But suppose we have a kid and my daughter is a lesbian. Then I remember, 20 years ago, I voted for something that my daughter will not like. And then how do I solve this? So that's why I'm saying going into the direction of tolerance, collaboration, and being constructive is actually what the European Union aims for, and I think that's where we should go.
Yeah, I can't help but agree with what you have been saying. And from my personal perspective, Italy is a country that's more liberal than Poland, at least currently. For example, you do have a law that lets people of one gender have civil partnerships, and the abortion is fully legal during the first trimester. Why do you feel that is?
Okay, that's so Italy, I can tell you, is still a conservative country, and that is the sad truth. And not even that sad, we are not as conservative as I might depict it right now. I think if Italy is any more liberal than Poland, is definitely due to the fact that Italy is a country, and the Italian culture is a culture that looks around itself. So we like the influence of foreign cultures, for foreign people, because we see what we can do better from outside. And sometimes we get what is better from outside. Sometimes. I say sometimes because there are things that came really late, and I'll tell you in a second what they are. Okay, I got a couple of examples.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think looking around us was the thing that made the difference. And so the two examples I can think of are, so the first one, the civil unions for people of the same sex that may be expected from Italy a while ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago. No, they came 5 years ago in 2016. So really, really early. Late, opposite. Really, really late. And still, by the way, for full clarity, civil unions are not the same as getting married.
Yeah.
They still do not have the right to get married in Italy. And still, for full clarity, to have a bigger picture on this, Italy was the first country to put on paper a law that would legalize people being gay. So the status of being gay was legal for the first time in the world on a piece of paper. But then it is still taking so long to allow everyone to do what they like, and I really don't understand why. And the second thing I can tell you as an example is the military service.
Mm-hmm.
So the compulsory military service was cheesed in 2005. And that's really late for a country like Italy that by constitution cannot declare war to anyone. Italy can only participate into conflicts in which an ally is defending itself, or can intervene after the war is ended as a peace mission, between quotes, because is often not peaceful, and to try to save and bring order and peace wherever there was a war once. So stopping the compulsory military service came rather late for a country like this. So there's another side of the story. The armed forces also join some internal forces that are employed within the country, and there between the end of World War II until the 80s or the 90s, there has been a quite long period of political instability between people being far left and people being far right, which we call anni di piombo, which means lead year, because bullets coming out from a gun were made of lead. And so within this scenario, there were also a lot of external influences from the United States, which intervened with their secret services in Italy. They did for two reasons. For the first official reason, of course, there are many others that are not known. The first official reason is the fact that Italy is in the center of Europe, is in the center of the Mediterranean, and was close. It was like really useful strategically speaking. The second reason is that Italy had the strongest communist party outside the Soviet Union. It was really influential. The Communist Party wrote part of the constitution of Italy that we still use nowadays. So that's why we had a strong influence even then from outside, that however didn't just bring the worst or bad things, it also brought progress. And we saw it in the 60s with the miracle. We call it the miracle, economic miracle. So this is to say that
and it is heading in the right direction, it seems.
Yeah,
that is quite interesting. From my own feelings, the Poland I grew up in was more open country than it is now. I feel like a lot of that openness and mixing of the ideas has been initiated by the firstly end of communism and more relaxed travel requirements, and secondly access to EU and the free flow of people across the internal borders of the Union, either for work or for leisure. And they did often bring back Western ideals and viewpoints, and that in turn enriched the culture. However, the level of living in Poland has been consistently rising since then, which reduced the need for living and working abroad, which in turn has decreased the mobility of people and ideas. Do you think that Italy would grow more conservative if that happened? And also, do you think that COVID necessitated isolation would speed up those trends internationally?
all right. So that could happen in principle, yeah, but knowing a bit the place where I'm from, I don't see it likely to happen because, as I told you before, Italy is a country and it has a culture that really looks around itself. It is really keen to collaborations, external affairs, external influence. And for example, we always look up to innovative policies implemented in the Netherlands, for example, or in Germany or in France, because that's where innovation roots from a policy perspective. And Italy often looks at that and sometimes picks up something that seems to work out. So this is one factor. The other factor is that Italy is by American standards would be a swing state. So it's a country that changes from left to right at every election. And so you get people that vote liberal today and may vote for church tomorrow. So that is a mechanism that, of course, creates instability in the long run, unfortunately. And you can see it in the fact that Italy has the 66th or the 67th prime minister in 70 years of Republican history. So we change idea very often. Yes, true. But at the same time, prevents this kind of radical ideas to root because the change of idea is so quick and so sudden that it's hard to root something in any idea into someone. So I hope this will stop it should it happen. And the things we see now with people that seem to be really conservative and from traditional family or this kind of things, I don't think those are necessarily to be those are no wins to be given to a politician. So the Salvini or Meloni that you see in the newspaper are not converting people to a more conservative idea of life. So those people that now support them and did not in the past are just swinging. They probably voted the left wing before. So I think on average the level of how conservative they are has been rather stable. Just the support has been going left to right, because left wing right now cannot be cannot think of a good term for this, but left wing is not a valid alternative to what the right wing offers, which is fear and speaking to your fear every single day, every single time.
Yeah.
And giving easy comfort to very complex problems, which will not be solved by the simple comfort I'm giving you, but at least will make you get until the end of the day. And that's, I think, as far as they can go, because long run, we cannot keep running on these tones of conversations, this inclination of ideas. No, we need to, this is, if that happens, then someone at some point will take advantage of it, and that will not look particularly good for Europe. About the pandemic, I think the pandemic has given really good chances for wannabe dictators to be dictators. In particular, I think about Hungary. That's an easy example, but I heard recently about Greece too. And so those people simply, with the excuse of COVID, would implement more and more authoritarian policies that would prevent people from striking. Or in Greece, they put the police in the university. The university should be independent from the government. That's what a university is. But still, now they have it. So I think that's really dangerous. And I hope the European Union will not take care of it, because in fact, I don't know exactly what they can do actively. But I hope they will try to put a solution there, because this is really scary, and this is not taking over the whole continent, of course, but knowing that there is that perspective not very far away, it is scary, even if we don't live in a place where this happens, of course. And I think there is also some mental health consideration to be done, especially when we look at the other side of the ocean with Capitol Hill, with people just invading the palace of the institutions that is, I mean, it looks pretty unbelievable. Looks like it's a war scenario or some civil war scenario. So I hope I would be at least very interested in knowing if there's any relation between COVID, mental health, and this event, because it is really unbelievable.
Yeah, and especially when we look to the past, then some critical events that create this atmosphere of fear and apprehension, like for example 9/11 attacks in USA, it gave rise to a huge amount of support for very conservative George W. Bush, and that's the atmosphere of so-called beleaguered castle that you were speaking of. That when somebody can use up your fears and apprehensions, that's a field day for the people using conservative viewpoints to get to the top.
Yeah. Maybe, I don't know, as people who study, people with more instruments against this should kind of step down and help those that are in a weaker position right now.
Yeah, but I guess the situation is really, it's not the very stable time in humanity's history, so possibly in a year or so we can look back and reassess the events that led us, the events that were happening, and where did they lead us. For now we can just more or less guess.
I suppose that's a lot of work for historians in the future.
Yeah, but it gets tiring to live during major historical events.
I'm on the same page. Yeah.
I could really use living in a more boring time right now. I mean, it's okay. It's okay if it happened once or twice, but to have the same thing happen 10 times in a row and to know that the history book will have the whole chapter devoted to this specific 2-3 years of your life.
Oh yeah.
It is a lot.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, on that positive note, thank you very much for you being here today, Andrea.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's a wrap.